بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So alhamdulillah, we are continuing revising the books from level 1 in the INKPOT syllabus. Now we are on the book Ad-Durus Al-Muhimmah li'ammatil Ummah, important lessons for the whole Ummah. And alhamdulillah, if you remember, we split the book into a number of different parts. Right? The first part was regarding basic tafsir. The second part, basic aqidah. The number 3, basic fiqh. Right? These are the main parts of the book. Then the ending was regarding the categories of sins and mannerisms and akhlaq. Right? Have I missed anything? Have I missed anything? What have I missed out? Category of sins and shirk is in there. Yeah, janaiz is at the end. Manners is in the middle. Khalas. Right. Okay, so where we reached is that we took the first part, which is regarding tafsir, because we took a whole book on it previously. And then we took the aqidah section. And we started the fiqh section. Now with the fiqh section, if you guys remember, I'm not sure if I remember this, if I mentioned this in Tuesday's lesson, but the general quick definition of fiqh is that it's pertaining to your physical, practical rulings. Right? Whereas aqidah is pertaining to your beliefs. And with fiqh, there were 4 main areas. Did I mention this on Tuesday? I didn't mention it on Tuesday, right? For fiqh, if you want to know what the topics are of fiqh, there are 4 main ones. There are others, but you can divide it generally into 4 main parts. The first is ibadat, worship. Number 2, mu'amalat, transactions. Number 3, family law, ahkam al-usra, family law. And number 4, criminal law, al-jinayat, criminal law, al-jinayat. So what are they? Worship, transactions, family law, and criminal law. Right? Al-ibadat wal-mu'amalat wa ahkam al-usra wal-jinayat. Right? So your ibadat are basically your 5 pillars of Islam apart from the first one. We don't include the shahadatain because that comes under with science. The shahadatain comes under where? It comes into aqidah. Yeah, the shahada. Right. The remaining pillars, salah, zakah, fasting and hajj, comes under fiqh. Okay. And then we have mu'amalat. Mu'amalat is your transactions, buying and selling, what's halal, what's haram, riba, and all of these issues. Then we have family law, that's when you have talaq and nikah and khula and all of these other issues. Then you have jinayat, criminal law, and that's all the issues pertaining to that. In this book here, the one that we're going through, we have what the Shaykh has explained is fiqh al-ibadat. Now the original book by Ibn Baz rahimahullah only has salah and tahara and wudu. But Shaykh Haytham added zakah, fasting and hajj as well. So the first thing that we started to take was fiqh of salah. Fiqh of salah. Now normally in the books of fiqh, they don't actually start with salah. They actually start with kitab al-tahara, the book of purification. And the reason for that is because before talking about salah, the first thing you talk about salah is the conditions. And one of the main conditions of salah is wudu. But with wudu, there are so many issues. Right? The first is the issue of what type of water can you use. And then where do you put that water? Right? And then all these other issues, right? So what the ulama have done is that they made a whole separate book on it, and they call it Kitab al-Tahara, the book of purification. So they'll talk about wudu, and then they'll talk about water, and they'll talk about utensils, but then they'll also talk about purification generally. They just put everything there. And then they move on to salah. Okay? The Shaykh here, he's on salah first, and then he's on wudu. But normally, tahara is mentioned first. So the way the Shaykh has split the book is the way fiqh books normally split these issues, which is by mentioning the technical rulings. So for salah, they'll mention the conditions first, and then the pillar or the obligations, and then the furud, and then the wajibat, and the nullifiers, and recommended actions, and so on. And then after that, they'll mention sifatul salah, the description of how to pray the salah from A to Z, without differentiating what's obligatory, what's not, because that's already taken. Right? And likewise with wudu. So we started with the conditions of salah. How many conditions of salah were there? 9. The first thing that you need to know minimum is the number. You need to know exactly how much, right? Then you start mentioning them. Okay? So there's 9. Right? And that's what we took. We took the conditions. Islam, al-aql, sanity, tamyiz, wudu, removing najasa, covering the private parts, entering of the time of prayer, and facing the Kaaba. We went through these, we talked about some of the issues. Tamyiz, what does tamyiz mean, Adam? When he reaches the age where he's able to differentiate between things, between right and wrong, and so on. And that's a ballpoint number is 7, but it's not restricted to 7. It could be earlier, right? And tamyiz is that condition of Asif. Well, wasif. I said that last time as well. No, wasif. Is tamyiz a condition of obligation or a condition of acceptance? What's the condition of obligation? Puberty. No. I think one thing I didn't mention, you can add this. There's so much we can mention. Obviously, we're going through it quickly, so I might not mention a few things. And whatever comes, that's what I'll mention, right? So, when does a person reach the age of puberty? What are the signs? How many are there? 7. Huh? The age of 7, mashallah. Right? 4. Okay, we say 3 generally, and then 4th one specific to women. Yeah? Number 1? Pubic hair. No. Number 2? Wet dreams. No. Number 3? Sama? No. Deepening of the voice. No. Yeah? The age of 15 in the Hijri calendar. That's only if the first 2 are not found. If the first 2 signs are not found, i.e. there's no pubic hair and he's not had a wet dream, then once he reaches the age of 15 in the Hijri calendar, then he's considered baligh. And that's due to the hadith of Ibn Umar, where the Prophet didn't allow him to partake in the battle of Badr, but he allowed him in Uhud. And the ulama said the difference was the age. Now, and then the 4th one, which is specifically for women, which is the monthly cycle starts. Wudu, we talked about wudu, and we said it's not specific to wudu, it's more general than that. And this word is known as hadith. And we have 2 types of hadith akbar and hadith asghar. Hadith akbar is major spiritual impurity, and this is where you are here. Where's the rest of your clan? Huh? They're not here today. There's no more good 4 or 5 of you. Right? Huh? What's hadith akbar? Hadith akbar, major spiritual impurity. You need to do wudu. La. The major one. Naam, take a bath or a shower. Okay, and the minor spiritual impurity is when you need to do wudu. We're going to talk about it a bit later. When do you need to do it, and so on, inshallah. Removing impurities, and we said that's from 3 things: the body, the place, the clothes. We mentioned 3 types. The most severe one is a dog. If a dog licks you, then you have to wash it. You have to wash it 7 times. Otherwise, if there's the rest of the body of the dog, I mentioned you don't have to, right? 7 times. However, if it's wet, like it's wet or your hands are wet or something like that, then you still wash it. Okay? But only once. You don't need to do it 7 times. Okay, you still wash it. Right? The specific ruling for 7 is for the saliva of the dog. Okay? That's due to the hadith mentioned the saliva. And then there's other hadith as well that mentioned that the Sahaba would touch dogs and things like that. Then we have the light type of impurity, physical impurity, which is the urine of the boy who has not begun eating, and also madhi and mani. So mani is semen, and madhi is pre-seminal fluid. And the difference, you can see in the color and the texture is different. That mani, semen, is more cloudy color and so on, whereas pre-seminal fluid is normally see-through. And the way it comes out is different as well. Mani, semen normally just comes out like that, whereas pre-seminal fluid comes out slowly, and also pre-seminal fluid normally comes before, like whilst maybe a person doing foreplay or anything like that. That's when it normally comes out, whereas semen comes when a person ejaculates normally. So if both of them fall on your body or on your clothes, it's considered from the light type of impurity, meaning It's not a condition that you have to wash it fully, right? It's enough just to sprinkle water on it, right? However, it's better to, right? Without a doubt. And the reason for this is, no, it says here the person will sprinkle water. But for example, especially money, firstly, the difference, if madhi comes out, pre-seminal fluid, it only breaks your wudu. So you do wudu, you don't have to have a shower. But if money comes out, semen, then you have to have a shower, you have to have a ghusl. And the reason for that is because it comes in hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, right? That sometimes on the clothing of the Prophet there would be some semen, money, right? Especially in those days when the houses were smaller and so on, it could happen. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she says that she used to scrape it with her nails, take it off like that, right? And it's known that if you do that with your nails, you're not going to take everything off. So for that reason, the ulama, many of them actually say that money, it's in of itself is pure. Like it's not considered najis in terms of the fiqh ruling. It doesn't mean that you just walk around with stains everywhere, right? But you know the difference in the fiqh ruling and between like what you do in real life, right? So you still wash it and clean it if you can. But let's say it happened, or you know you see it, you need to pray. Inshallah, it's pure and enough is to sprinkle over it. Yeah, and that's because you asked me the question as well last week on Tuesday, right? That money, you asked about being pure, right? So the reason the ulama says pure is number one, because the hadith of Aisha, and number two, because it's the foundation, the origin of mankind. What we created from semen, right? So it doesn't make sense that the origin of mankind and what he's created from is something najis. It's something which is pure. And then every other type of impurity comes under moderate, and that you just wash it until it becomes clean. No. Come inshallah, it's going to come. Then covering the private parts, we talked about three types. The severe one is for the woman, she has to cover everything apart from her face. The light one, the kids, 7 to 10, just the private parts. And moderate is everybody else, belly button to navel, and also the shoulders. They should do for salah, and in fact they should dress fully appropriately. Prayer time, you pray within the time. Inshallah, in the bigger fiqh books we'll talk about the time, but the simple answer right now is follow the timetable. Facing the qibla, if you can see the qibla, you have to hit it exactly. If you can't see it, then you have to hit, general direction is fine, and you have a leeway of 90 degrees, as the Prophet said. What's between the west and the east is the qibla. Is the screen not showing? Aman, are we not sharing the screen? And then your intention, right? Intention should be in the heart. You don't need to verbalize it. In fact, it's a condition. It's not working today. Okay. Right, that's the conditions. Let's move on to the pillars. Now, how many pillars are there? 14. Who can remind me, what do we mention? The difference between a condition and a pillar? Shiraz. So the first difference is pillar condition starts before until the end, and pillar is just during the action. And the second is that condition is continuous, but pillar is just one part of the action. So wudu the whole time. You do it before the salah and it stays with you till the end. Surah Fatiha, just one part of the salah. Once you enter ruku', you don't recite Surah Fatiha. Okay. Now there's another important point regarding pillars as well, which we're going to get to, and the difference in pillars and obligations shortly, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So there are 14, right? Number one, standing if you're able. Then the first takbir, reciting Fatiha, ruku', bowing, standing straight after bowing, prostrating upon 7 body parts, getting up from prostration, sitting between the 2 prostrations, tranquility in all of the positions, the order of the pillars, the final tashahhud, the sitting for the final tashahhud, making dua for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and giving salam on both sides. We're going to go through each one individually, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Standing up. Al-qiyamu ma'al qudrah. Standing if you have the ability. If you don't have the ability, you sit down. And if you can't sit down, you lay down, as we know in the famous hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, there's a difference between obligatory salawat and nawafil salawat. In an obligatory salah, you have to stand up if you have the ability to. So if you're tired, you stand up. Okay? But in the recommended salawat, it's even if you're nothing wrong with you just want to sit down, it's permissible to sit down. That's in nawafil only. In the sunnah salahs. However, if you do that, then your reward is halved. No, just permissible. Not sunnah. Just permissible. No. La, la. In fact, the asl is sitting down on your knees, and not the chair. Huh? Okay. Pillar number two, first takbir. What we mean by takbir is saying Allahu Akbar. Saying Allahu Akbar. That's the takbir. So that's the pillar. It's called takbiratul ihram. All the other takbirat have different names, right? The first takbir, the first time you say Allahu Akbar is known as takbiratu al-ihram. The reason it's called ihram, from the word, what does it sound like? Haram. The reason it's haram is because once you say Allahu Akbar, you've begun your salah and it's haram for you to eat and drink and talk. Yeah, those things become haram for you. Hence the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, تحريمها التكبير. What makes a salah haram, all these other actions haram, التكبير. So when you say takbir, takbir al-ihram, it is saying Allahu Akbar. As for raising the hands, رفع اليدين, that's called رفع. رفع means raising al-yadayn, the two hands. This is mustahab, by ijma' in the beginning of salah. Okay? So if you just stand there and say Allahu Akbar, technically salah is acceptable, but it's not something you should leave off. Okay? In fact, there's a narration I read in Ibn Qayyim's book. He's got a book called رفع اليدين. Ibn Qayyim got a whole book on it. In there he mentions a statement of Imam Ahmad, and Imam Ahmad was asked, what do you say about a person who doesn't do رفع اليدين? Should we boycott that person and leave him? And Imam Ahmad said, if you've explained the sunnah to him and it becomes clear to him and he still doesn't do it, boycott that person. Yeah? Now that doesn't mean you go around doing it to every single person. But the point is that, because some people, they say, look, we don't know anything, we're just going to follow. Khalas, they could be excused because they're laymen. But, it shows that it's a sunnah of the Prophet. And if you know that it's a sunnah, you shouldn't leave it off. No. So, the summary is that all, majority, 99% of the Sahaba all narrated that the Prophet used to do Raf' al-Yadayn. And the khilaf of Raf' al-Yadayn is only when it comes to coming up from ruku' and going down to ruku', not in the beginning of salah. Yeah? And that's why there's a little debate between Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. And they prayed salah together. So Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said to Ibn al-Mubarak, why are you trying to fly in salah? Yeah, you keep doing the way you're trying to fly. So Ibn Mubarak said, if I wanted to fly, I would have flown in the beginning of the salah. Yeah, because that's by ijma'. All the ulama agree that in the beginning you say Allah Akbar. Right, khalas. Abu Hanifa lost that debate. But the reason they do it is because they have a hadith of Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. The majority of the Sahaba, from them, they say that there's only two ahadith that all the 10 promised paradise have narrated. The one is Man kadhaba alayhi muta'ammidan falyatabawa maq'adahu min an-nar. Whoever lies about me intentionally, let him take a seat in the hellfire. That was narrated by 62 companions. And the other is Raf' al-Yadayn. Yeah? And if not all 10, some may have said 9. Right? But they have a hadith of Ibn Mas'ud. The problem with that is that firstly it's one narrator, one Sahabi going against all the other Sahaba. Right? Number two, the hadith of affirming Raf' al-Yadayn are all authentic. They're in Bukhari, they're all authentic. There's no doubt in them whatsoever. Whereas one of Ibn Mas'ud is doubtful. The khilaf whether it's authentic or not authentic. And so on. And number three, there's so many things of Ibn Mas'ud that they don't follow. Like Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, I don't know if any of you remember Shaykh Zafar. Anyone remember what Shaykh Zafar mentioned Ibn Mas'ud used to do in ruku'? Yeah, why would he do them? Put his hands together between. So instead of, where do we put hands in ruku'? On the knees, right? That's the thing. As long as your hands are on your knees, your ruku', except even if you're not fully straight, you're a bit high. As long as it's on your knees, it's fine. He knows to put on his knees. He used to put them between together. That was something which was legislated in the beginning of Islam, but it was abrogated. But Ibn Mas'ud used to do it. But they don't follow him in that. They don't follow him in everything. Yeah? So that's basically a summary of the issue. But it's clear cut. The Prophet ﷺ used to do Raf' al-Yadayn. And a general principle of Usul al-Fiqh as well is that al-Muthbat muqaddam ala al-Manfi. Wal-Muthbit muqaddam ala al-Manfi. That if, let's say this, even if, forget there were so many Sahaba, let's just say there were one Sahabi against another Sahabi. One Sahabi is saying, I saw the Messenger of Allah doing this, and the other one is saying, I didn't see him do it. One's affirming an action, and the other one's negating. A well-known principle of Usul al-Fiqh is that the one that's affirming, that is given precedence over the one that's negating. Why? Because this one has extra knowledge. Maybe he missed it. But the other one is saying, no, I saw it. And we know that they're trustworthy. The other one is saying he didn't see it, right? But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Yeah? So even if it was just one by one, without that you do it. Yeah. But with that being said, the general person, if he does it, right, and they're excused because they're layman, right? Otherwise, if you go to every single person, it's going to cause issues. Right. Number 3, reciting Surah Fatiha. Right? Reciting Surah Fatiha is a pillar of the Salah. The Prophet said, لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. There's no Salah for the one who doesn't recite the opening of the book. And another narration, بأم الكتاب or بأم القرآن. The mother of the book, i.e. Surah Al-Fatiha. So we have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Number 4, tranquility in all positions. What it means by tranquility here is the word طمأنينة, not the word khushu'. So طمأنينة, tranquility means you have to be in that position long enough for you to say what's obligatory upon you. You have to be long enough in that position, enough for you to say what's obligatory upon you. And some people, between two sujood, they do this for example, yeah? So they're in sujood, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. How on earth have you even said one word in that time? Or they'll say, Sami Allahu liman hamidah, Allahu Akbar. There's no time to say anything, right? So that a person does that, it negates the pillar of tranquility. Okay, the Shaykh doesn't comment on the others. Well, let's go through this quickly. Ruku', right? So the minimum for ruku' is that your hands have to be on your knees. Now the best is that if you can keep your back straight like that, like an ironing board, or if you get like a glass of water, you can put it and it's gonna stay. Yeah. If it falls on the person, then his fault. He's not doing ruku' properly. Yeah. If, however, he's up a little bit or down a little bit, but his hands are on his knees, it's accepted. It's not the best because it's not straight, but it's accepted. Right? Once he starts coming off of the knees, then he'll be like that. That's when it's not done. Yeah. Standing straight after bowing. This is very important. After you do ruku', you stand up until you are straight. You affirm that you're straight, and then you go down. That's a pillar. Without the salah is not accepted. And so many people do what? They don't ruku', right? And then they'll say, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Even that is a good one actually. They're actually worse than that, right? Sami Allahu liman hamida. Allah, like they're here, and then they're going down. They've not stood up like this, right? They've not stood up fully. They're like here. So you have to make sure that you sit properly. Same with the sujood, sitting between two positions. You come up, your back straight, and then you go back down. Yeah. Then prostrating upon the 7 body parts. What are the 7 body parts? Face. The whole face. The forehead till the nose. Yeah, that's one. And then 2 hands, 2 knees, 2 feet. The Prophet ﷺ said, I have been commanded to do sujood upon 7 body parts. Yeah, and then he mentioned these 7 body parts. So these 7 have to be on the ground. Not that your head's on the ground, hands on the ground, knees on the ground, and your feet are dangling there. That's not sujood. Okay? Now. The toes are going the opposite way. Yeah. That inshallah is valid, inshallah. As long as it's touching, inshallah it should be okay. Now. Yeah. Just the one. One is problematic. It's just a toe. Huh? That's problematic. That should be a decent amount. If let's say the pinky is coming out, that's okay, but it should be a good decent amount at least. Same with the hand. Even if the palm's not fully on, as long as the main hand is there, that's fine. Right? It is mentioned in the books of fiqh, in the bigger books of fiqh, like in Road al-Murbi' and things like that. They do mention that as long as part of the hand is there. But one toe is that's a bit problematic now. How is your foot turning into a fist? Not like yeah, I get that. Yeah, it's facing the other way. Yeah, and it shouldn't be. But Wallahu a'lam. That's a bit. I'm doing it now, so it's a bit of a weird one. Wallahu a'lam. Why? Somebody does that? Hadith just mentions feet, it doesn't mention which part exactly, but we know that's the part is done, and your toes should be facing the Qibla. Your toes should be facing the Qibla. So that particular one, Allah, let's get that one checked, inshallah. Just double check, just to make sure. No. Okay. Getting up from prostration and sitting between the two prostrations. So make sure you sat properly. Yeah? Tranquility or positions, we talked about that. The order of the pillars. So you've got to pray in order. The final tashahhud. So how many times do you do tashahhud in salah? In Fajr you do it 2 or 3 times? In Fajr you do it 2 times? 1, okay. Right. Obviously if the salah is more than 2 rak'at, then it's you do 2 times. Or 3. What salah do you do 3 times? Or if you come late? You come in the last rak'ah and then you do 3. Or witr. You can pray witr 9 rak'at or 11 rak'at. Okay, maybe. Right. 2 times. So outside of the 2 rak'at salah, 3 and 4 rak'at, you do tashahhud twice. Yeah. The second one is the pillar, or the last one. Let's just say that's what it says, the last tashahhud, because then if it's just one, that's the last one as well. Yeah. That's the pillar. The first one, if there's 2, that's an obligation, not a pillar. We're going to talk about the difference between the two shortly, inshallah. Number 12, the sitting for the final tashahhud, so make sure you sat down for it. Making dua, and sending salah upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, if you don't, then your salah is not accepted. You know, sometimes, subhanAllah, you'll find some people, they'll attack us and say, you guys don't love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you don't do it. In our fiqh, our salah is not even accepted without sending salah upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then you find many of them don't do it. Number 14, giving salam on both sides. No. Right, now we come to the obligations. No. Big ulama debating, and you're saying, oh, which one's correct? Huh? MashaAllah. So look, the issue with the finger, firstly, it's not an obligation, or so you don't need to worry about it too much, yeah? But the thing is, the hadith mentions the person will take it up and down. When and for how long doesn't specify. That's why each madhab has a different opinion. Right? The Hanafis say when you say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu Muhammad Rasul, that's it, and then after I bring it down, but you don't bring it back up again. Which from one aspect makes sense, because the finger is like a sign of Tawheed. So you say the Shahada, you bring it up. Okay? And the Maliki Shafi'is have their own one. The Hanabila they have a good one. And many ulama say this seems to be the closest to the Sunnah, is that whenever Allah's name is mentioned. Because that way it's for Tawheed, but at the same time it's more common now. Right? So you go up and you go down, and after you go up and you go down. And some ulama like Albani and others, they just say that you just take it up and then slowly bring it back down, and just take it. Like, there's no specific time for it. Wallahu alam, yani. It's all okay. In the bigger books, inshallah. Right. So we finished with pillars. Now we're going to move on to obligations. What's the difference between a pillar and obligation? Pillar and obligation are very similar. Meaning if you miss both of them out intentionally, your salah is invalid. However, the difference is if you miss them out unintentionally, yani forgetfully. If you miss out a pillar unintentionally, unintentionally, a pillar unintentionally, then the salah is invalid. The rak'ah is invalid unless you're able to go back, right, and do the action, or you make up the whole rak'ah again, right? Or if you after the salah class, you have to make the salah up again, right? So basically, simply, if you don't do a pillar, intentionally breaks your salah. Unintentionally, it breaks your salah unless you're able to come with it. Yeah. But with the obligation, if you miss an obligation out unintentionally, you carry on and you just do the sujood sahu, the 2 sujood of forgetfulness at the end, and that makes up for it. For example, I prayed my salah and I missed out a whole sujood. Right? Khas, I either have to bring the whole rak'ah again, or after the salah I realized I didn't do a sujood, khas, you got to pray the salah again. Okay? But an obligation, as we're going to get to now, is saying in sujood, saying Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. Let's say I didn't say, I said Subhana Rabbiyal Azim by accident, or I said something else, right? And I didn't say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. Then, khlas, you carry on. And then, before salam, you do sujood sahu. Make up for it now. you're close to it, within the same rak'ah, you go back to it, if you're able to. If you're leading a salah and stuff, then it's a bit more complicated. Everyone's going to get confused. But if you buy, this is more if you buy yourself. If you make one of these mistakes, an obligation, behind the imam, it's fine. The imam takes the thing. So if you, in sujood or daydreaming, he says something else, you don't have to do sujood sahwi at the end. So with the questions regarding sujood sahwi, is it regarding sujood sahwi? Sujood of forgetfulness. Okay, it's going to come. It's going to come. Right. There's a whole section of sujood sahwi. Ask me then. Right. So that's the difference between pillar and obligation. Right. What are the obligations? There are 8. Number 1, all of the takbirs except for the first takbir. So remember, takbirat al-ihram is a pillar. The other takbirat are known as takbirat al-intiqal. Takbir of al-intiqal. Intiqal means, what does intiqal mean? Yeah, to move. Or transport or transmission, any of those meanings, depending on the context. So, i.e., you say these takbirat as you're moving from position to position. And it's also important to notice that when do you say it? You don't say it before. You have 3 options. Imagine you're going into ruku', yeah? You can say it before you're going to ruku', you can say it during, as you're going down, or you can say it once you're in ruku'. 2 are correct and 1 is incorrect. The 2 incorrect ones is saying it before and after. When do you say it? You say it as you go down. And for example, right? I'm standing up here. So now I'm praying the salah. Allahu Akbar, right? I say Allahu Akbar and I go down. Some people do that, right? Why? Because the mic's there. So imams do that. They say Allahu Akbar and then they go down. That's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is as I'm going down, right? Allahu Akbar. Right? So I started when I was up. With this one, sometimes it might overlap. Like you might say it a second earlier while you're standing, or you might say it and you stretched it, so you fall into ruku' and you finish it. That's fine, as long as it's said whilst you're going. If there's a bit of overlap, it's fine. Okay. The third option is I get into ruku', right? Allahu Akbar. I'm in ruku'. Okay. Which ones are incorrect? Number 1 and number 3. Okay. Many ulama say if you do that and you know the ruling, your salah is invalid. Okay. Because you've come with a pillar in the incorrect place. And if I recite Surah Fatiha in sujood, is that going to benefit me? Haider. It's not. So you've not come with a pillar in its correct place. Rather, you say it as you're going down. Now, obviously, there is the issue of sometimes the mic doesn't pick you up and so on. In that case, what you do is that you say the beginning of it in the mic, and then the rest you say as you're going down. Right? Because as soon as people say, here, Allah, they're going to go. They're not going to say, Allah, all right, Allah. What's he trying to say by saying Allah? No, they're here, they're gone before you. Yeah? So, you say a little bit, if there's ever a darura, a necessity, the principle is الضرورة تقدر بقدرها. We study in Qa'id Fiqhiyya, right? In legal maxims. But whenever we allow something for a necessity, there's a sub-rule of that, subcategory of that, which is the necessity has to be measured by the amount that's needed. And for example, if you're in the desert and you're starving and you're about to die, and you find something haram, are you allowed to eat it? You're allowed to eat it. Does that mean you have a full 3-course meal? And that's it, khinzir is pig or pork, right? Akramakumullah. Does that mean? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That's it. Pull out the steak and pull out, right? Bring the sauces. You have a full 3-course meal. La, you have the amount that keeps you alive, and then you move on. That's the amount that is allowed for you, and after that, it's not allowed for you. And this principle applies to anything. If anything becomes permissible due to a need, you only are allowed to do the amount which the need requires. Another example is the science of al-jarh wa ta'adil. Sharat, what's al-jarh wa ta'adil? Ammar? MashaAllah, why don't I mention some topics? I see some faces, MashaAllah. Ahmed, your face is glowing. Ammar smiling, MashaAllah. Right, huh? Awab's not here, but Awab would be loving it down there. Hafidhullah. Na'am. Shafahullah is quite ill, make dua for him. Right? Jarh wa ta'adil. The word jarh means criticism and ta'adil means praise. I.e., in hadith, when we have the narrators, right? How do we know if the hadith is accepted or not? It depends on the trustworthiness of the narrators. So the scholars have to now speak, he's trustworthy, he's a liar, he's not trustworthy, he's got weak memory. Right? And sometimes you praise him, no, he's very good, he knows his stuff inside out. And sometimes you have to speak bad. Right? You have to say he's a liar. This is called jarh wa ta'adil. They talk about the people, the narrators, so that you know their trustworthiness and so on. And it can still be applied now from like your teachers and stuff. You say like, you don't study from this person, he's a person of innovation, he calls a bid'ah, he calls a shirk. It has to be done because it's a means of preserving the religion. But notice, the default ruling is what? The default ruling is speaking bad about somebody is what? It's haram. Why? It's ghibah. It's ghibah, right? It's backbiting. You can't speak bad about another Muslim, especially regarding his honor. But anything that makes him upset, you can't speak about it. But in this particular scenario, it becomes halal. In a simple term, jarh wa ta'adil is halal backbiting. Why? It's needed to preserve the religion. If you don't do it, we're not going to know which hadith is accepted and which one's not. Right? Now, we're going back to the principle. Speaking about these narrators is permissible due to the necessity, the need. Therefore, you're only allowed to speak the amount which is needed. If all that you need to say is, he lied when narrating hadith, or he lied normally, therefore, even if a person lies normally, not in hadith, that hadith we don't accept. That's one of the weakest hadith. Just behind mawdu', just behind fabricated, al-muttahim bil-kadhib, the one who's accused of lying. Even if he didn't lie in hadith, he lied in normal speech. All you have to say is, he lied. Yeah? But you don't then turn around and say, he's a liar, and he's bisharam, and he's this, and everything of bad word that you can think of, you speak about it. Right? Some people do that. Some people go, right? They'll go to the coffee shop, they won't come to any lessons. Right? And if they do, they'll sit at the back and chill, act like tulab al-ilm. Or they'll come to the dawra and they'll come at food time only and they show their face a little bit. They won't sit there in lessons. But then when it's time to go out and eat, they're there. And they're speaking about hours about this person and that person and this person and that person. Right? And they're speaking, even within that speech, right, they speak more than what's needed. But then what's funny, 2 days later, they're out again speaking about the exact same person. You've already spoken about it, you made your point, why speak about him again and again? And people have made this, in Arabic they call daylana. From their deen basically, that they've made it is their religious habit that they do every single day, they have to speak about people. Now this is not permissible. Right? And that's what the Prophet ﷺ, he asked the Sahaba, do you know who the bankrupt person is? Who's bankrupt? And the Sahaba said, Man la dirham la. The one that doesn't have any dirhams, any money, he's the one who's bankrupt. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no. The one who's bankrupt, truly bankrupt, is, it's still a type of bankruptcy, without doubt, but and there's actually fiqh rulings on this, hajar wa taflis and so on. But the Prophet he explains, he goes, no, the one who's truly bankrupt is one who comes Yawm al-Qiyamah and he works so hard to bring all of these good deeds. But he spoke bad about this person, he backbited that person, he hit that person, he did this to this person, he killed that person. So what's going to happen? Each person is going to take his good deeds. Right? And then if he's got no good deeds left, the bad deeds they have, they're given to him. Right? And that's what Ibn Daqiq al-Eid rahimahullah, he said, أَعْرَاضُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ حُفْرَةٌ مِنْ حُفْرِ النَّارِ. The honor of the Muslims is a pit from the pits of the hellfire. It's haram, you're not allowed to speak about the honor of the Muslims. But he says, وَقَفَ عَلَى شَفِيرِهَا طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ النَّاسِ. But those who are standing on the edge of that pit are two types of people. Al-Muhaddithun wal-Hukkam. The scholars of the hadith and the rulers and the judges. Why? If you're ruling and you're judging, you have to speak about people. You have to give rulings, he's a liar or he's not. Likewise, Muhaddithun. So they're not in the pit of the hellfire. Why? Because it's permissible. They have to do it. But they're on the edge. Why? They have to make sure they speak at the amount that's needed. If you go overboard, right, you fall into haram. You fall into haram. And if you look, if I say to you, who's the strictest person when it comes to authenticity of hadith, you're going to say Bukhari. Obviously, Imam hadith is different. But in general, everyone knows Bukhari because of how strict he was in Sahih Bukhari. If you look at the way that he speaks about narrators, right? I can't remember the exact wording, but he'll just say something along the lines of, he won't even say that he's a liar. No, he won't say that. He'll say, we left him, but we didn't write his hadith. That means this guy's the weakest narrator. According to Imam Bukhari, that means this guy's the weakest narrator and don't ever listen to him. But he'll say something nice like, yeah, we didn't write it down. Right? Why? Speaking about people is very dangerous now. Major, Allah. Because then there's been other things described about it, eating the flesh of your brother and things like that. Now, anyways, how do we get here? Yeah, what had to do with jarh wa ta'deel, huh? Naam, the amount that's needed. Yeah? But what did I have to do anything? Oh, naam, microphone. Naam, ahsant, mashallah, you guys. We found the sanad back to speech, but we're going to go off again, huh? So the ruling the ulama give is that they say generally salah is not accepted of the one who knows. If he didn't know, right, then inshallah, so if he's got shubha, doubt, then maybe. But that excuse that he has, people might go in front of him, that's not valid. Why? What's the difference between him praying and the person praying and saying it at that time? Can people not go in front of him as well? The mic, I understand. You tell us, you be stern. Fuqaha mentioned this, and what you mentioned is not valid. If he turned around and said the mic, it doesn't pick it up if I go down or something, then maybe, then we can work with it a little bit. But then we say to him, look, to say the beginning and then move straight away. Alright? Because it's doable, yani. Allahu Akbar. The ending you didn't hear, but you heard the beginning. That's what I do. Like, when I salah now, did you hear my Allahu Akbar? Or anyway, you were like, I didn't hear it. You heard it, my takbirat, right? Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I just at the beginning here, and then I say it loud, so even when I'm ruku', if you want us to pick it up. Say it loud enough, it picks you up. Right? Now, so advise that person. Inshallah, advise him. I say, you're looking at him up. Maybe. Say my name to him. Say my name to him. Right, what are we on? Number 2. Okay, so what are these takbirat called? Takbirat al-intiqal. Naam. Right, I want to go faster. This is meant to be revision. It's not meant to be. I told you guys fiqh. What did I tell you? What did the teachers do? No questions. Right, until I finished fiqh section, any questions. You got questions written down, ask me after I finish. I want to try and finish in 10 minutes. Right, saying Sami' Allahu liman hamida for the imam and the one praying alone. So we have 3 types of people. Imam, the one praying behind the imam, and the one praying by himself. Who says Sami' Allahu liman hamida? The imam and the one praying by himself. The one who's behind the imam in the salah does not have to say Sami' Allahu liman hamida. Right? He says the next one, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Right? And then saying Subhana Rabbil Azim in ruku' and saying Subhana Rabbil A'la in sujood, saying Rabbi ghfirli between the 2 sujood minimum once. The first tashahhud, the sitting down for the first one is an obligation. Meaning, if you forget, what do you do? Sujood sahwa at the end. Yeah? And then sitting for the first tashahhud as well. Getting up, there's 3 scenarios. Right? If you forget, let's say after the second rak'ah, second sujood, you say Allahu Akbar. As you're getting up, so either your legs are bent, or as you're getting up, you remember that, I'm meant to be sat down, it's obligatory to sit back down, and you continue, you don't have to do anything. Okay, because you remember straight away, that's fine. Once you've stood up fully though, but you've not started reciting, here you have a choice. Okay, and some ulama say it's makruh to go back down. Because now you've stood up, right? It's a different pillar. Yeah? Okay? If you've started reciting Surah Fatiha, it's not allowed for you to go back. You've fully started the next rak'ah now. Right? You just not start, you carry on, you just do the at the end. Okay? Let's be very careful. Sometimes as Imam, if it happens, if I have doubt, I actually stand there for like a second and don't recite Surah Fatiha. Just in case somebody says, once I start Surah Fatiha, and people say SubhanAllah and I have to go back down, then it's a problem. Because they'll be shouting SubhanAllah, not knowing the ruling that I've started Surah Fatiha, I'm not allowed to go back down. Yeah? So just be careful of that bismillah ta'ala. The Shaykh mentions the tashahhud and the meaning of tashahhud. The recommended actions, these are all of the sunan acts of salah. For example, the simple answer is that the things we didn't mention, they're sunnah. And did we mention, as soon as you say Allahu Akbar, saying the dua, between Allahu Akbar Surah Fatiha. No, so therefore the dua is sunnah. You should do it, and the best sunnah, there's more than one dua narrated. Subhanakallahumma, Allahumma ba'id bayni wa bayna khataya, and others, right? And there's some that are specific for the night prayer and so on. The best is that you change. Each time you pray, you say a different one. That way, two benefits. Number one, you act upon all of the sunnah. You act upon when the Prophet said this, and you act upon what the Prophet did here. But then number two as well, it increases your khushu', because you're saying different things. Right? It's not like just like a customary act anymore. Right? But the good thing about knowing this is that sometimes, let's say you're in a hurry or you forget, you know, because it's sunnah, if you say Allahu Akbar and you said Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and you start Surah Fatiha, Salah is accepted. Salah is accepted. So you can read all of the recommended actions yourself. Right? Nullifiers of the prayer. Now the Shaykh, he mentions, from nullifiers of the prayer, he mentions 8. Oh, no, the other 2 are in wudu. That's fine. Okay, what are they? Number 1, intentionally speaking whilst remembering and knowing. Forgetting or not knowing does not invalidate the prayer. And if you intentionally speak, it's not allowed. Right? If you forgetfully say something, and as soon as you remember, you stop, that's fine, it's forgiven, inshallah. Okay? Number 2, laughing. Laughing means noise comes out. If you just smile, inshallah, it's fine. Okay? And if you laugh, you don't have to do wudu again. Some people think you have to do wudu again. That's the Hanafi madhab. You don't have to. There's no authentic hadith regarding it. I think there's one, but it's weak. Number 3, eating and drinking. Obviously, breaks your salah. Exposing the private parts. So the awrah that you meant to cover, if it becomes uncovered, your salah is not accepted. If it happens very quickly, and you cover it up quickly, that's fine. Okay? Especially back in the day, when they had less clothing and so on, sometimes it would happen. So if they cover themselves up quickly, that's completely fine. If it happens to be, sometimes it happened to me once as well, and I think somebody asked as well, if you have a very small little hole, like that big or something very minute or small, that's fine, that's overlooked. Okay? Deviating a lot from the qibla. And if you're facing here, if you come a little bit here, that's fine. Right? But if you're going really far from the qibla, you're going the opposite direction, and khalas. Yeah? And that happens. But it's allowed in nawafil. And if you're traveling. If you're traveling, it's nafil salah. If it's obligatory, you stop. Like, let's say you're driving a car, right? But not while you're driving. In the passenger seat, you shouldn't be thinking while you're driving. You say Allahu Akbar, Bismillah, everyone else is just Allah stand. All right. Let's say salah time, class, you stop. Fard, you get up, you have to do the pillars. Okay? You stop at the service station. Alhamdulillah, it's very easy nowadays. But let's say nafil, you don't pray nafil. Right? You're allowed to. What you do is that you try to face the qibla in the beginning. After that, wherever the car goes, it's fine. That's because the Prophet used to pray on a camel sometimes. And that's what he used to do. Okay? Inshallah, there's more details, we'll take it. It comes in Rodo Murbi'. I can't remember if it comes in Zad, but inshallah. Number 7, continuous unnecessary movements whilst praying. We'll get to that. And obviously breaking wudu. With the exception of a person who helps the Imam, that's saying subhanallah and so on. Alright, what's the ruling on moving in salah? Sharaza, you have to move in salah. On what? How many rulings do we have? 5. The 5 rulings in fiqh all apply here. What are the 5 rulings? Obligatory, recommended, permissible, disliked, impermissible. Yeah? Wajib, or fard, mandub, mustahab, or sunnah, mubah, or jaiz, makruh, and haram. Right? Depending on what the movement is and how many is, the ruling changes. Right? The Shaykh mentions them. When did he get that working? Quite a while ago. I think I saw something from Qanai, but I didn't look. Right. Okay. So, prohibited movements. When it's many unnecessary consecutive movements. It's a lot. Unnecessary, there's no need. And it's consecutive. Right? Some ulama have said so much so that if somebody looks at you, they can't even tell if you're in salah. That khalas, breaks his salah. Disliked, slight unnecessary movements. So if you're moving and doing stuff and there's no need, that's disliked. But if it's a little bit, it's fine. It doesn't break your salah. What's permissible? Necessary movement. And you got a really bad itch, you can't concentrate with that itch, khas. You carry on. Permissible. Okay? Or fly right onto your nose, khas. Permissible. Recommended, is any movement that completes the salah. And if there's a little gap between you and the next person, you can move a little bit and close that gap, for example. Okay? Obligatory, the validity of the prayer depends on it, such as removing impurity. And you've seen, you got gloves on, or you got a watch on, you got something, and there's impurity, khlas, that taking it off, that's obligatory. As soon as you, like the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he was wearing sandals, there's impurity on the sandals. As soon as Jibreel alayhi salam informed him, what did he do? Sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he took off his sandals. Now, okay, these are the differences between the recommended obligatory pillars and conditions. We've explained them. Right, sujood sahu. So all those are got questions? Don't get ready, wait until I finish the whole salah section, inshallah, then ask. Okay, otherwise I'm not going to finish it. When do we do, by the way, those who are new, some new faces, this is revision. We finished the book, we've taken it in detail. A lot more detail than what we're mentioning now, a lot slower. This is revision, so I'm trying to do it quickly. Yeah. Why do we do sujood as-sahu? Sahu means forgetfulness. The prostration, the sujood for forgetfulness. There are 3 reasons. Either you add something, you've done something extra, either you miss something out, or you have a doubt. Right? An increase such as you added an extra sujood or ruku or something. Decrease, you missed one of them out. But remember, you missed out an obligation, not a pillar. Missing out an obligation. What happens if you miss out sunnah? Ahmed? Yeah. It's actually a lot easier than you think. Yeah. You don't do anything. And if I say instead of Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times, I say it once. Do sujood sahu? لا خلاص. Sunnah, you do it, you don't do it. It's fine. You do it, you reward it, you don't do it, nothing on you. Okay? Right. Then the third reason is a doubt. The third reason is a doubt. I.e., am I on my 3rd raka'ah or am I on my 4th? For example. If you have a doubt, what's the principle? Huh? It says it there? No, before sujood sahu, before. Al-yaqeen la yuzu bil shak. What you do is, certainty is not moved by doubt. We'll get to the after one, yeah, but we're talking about doubt within the salah, yeah. What you do, the principle that all the scholars agree on is, certainty is not removed by doubt. Meaning, if you're certain of something, then you have a doubt, you don't act upon the doubt, you stick to what's certain. So, do I have wudu or not have wudu? You think, what am I certain about? I'm certain I did wudu. I'm doubtful, did I break it? I don't know. 50-50. Doubt means 50-50. Yeah? I don't know. In that scenario, you're certain about wudu, you're doubtful about breaking it, therefore you stick to what's certain, you have wudu. The opposite, you know you went to the bathroom, you broke your wudu. You're doubtful. After coming out of the bathroom, did I do wudu or not? What's the ruling? You have wudu? You don't have wudu, right? Because you know you went to the bathroom, right? So, am I on my 3rd raka'ah or on my 4th? 3rd, because you're certain, minimum 3. You're doubtful about the 4th one. So when it comes to numbers, you basically stick to the lower number. Same in tawaf. I've done 6 or I'm on my 7th. Doubtful, you stick to the 6th. Yeah? So that's what you do. So let's see what the Shaykh says. He says there's 2 types. If it's after, you have a doubt after, like you finish your salah, then you have a doubt, you ignore it. A doubt, not certainty. And if you realize you actually made a mistake, like, then you have to sort it out. Yeah? But you don't know, like, did I do this? Like, once you finish, you ignore it. But during the salah, if you're somebody that doubts often, like nearly every salah, every second salah, you have doubts, like you just ignore it. You don't worry about anything. Yeah, because this person's got waswas, and the more you think about it, the more you act upon it, the stronger it gets. But if it's a little, you should act upon what's more certain. I.e., if you're like 90% sure I did this, you stick to that. Okay? But if it's doubt, i.e., they're both equal, 50-50, I don't know. Yeah, equal. Then you should act upon the lesser number. That's what we explained. Yeah? Okay. What if you, in Arabic they say, huwa saha an sahu, which means he forgets to do sujood sahu. Huh? It's okay. Alhamdulillah, it's fine. It's fine. Good. Okay. If one doubts in the prostration forgetfulness, there's nothing about in the he forgets to do it. If one forgets a pillar, he must go back and complete and everything which comes after it, then prostrate for forgetfulness. So if you're in like that position, like for example, you're standing up from Fatiha, you're going straight into the sujood. Then you're able to go back to standing and you go into ruku' and you carry on like normal. But if it's been more than a rak'ah, then no. Because then your salah is all over the place. If one forgets an obligation and passes its place, yeah, you don't go back and do it, you just do sujood sahwi at the end. Then the Shaykh mentions the whole description of how to pray. You can read that in your own time. Something not to do. Then the Shaykh finishes off by mentioning different prayers. In the actual fiqh books, each of these prayers has a whole chapter and rulings pertaining to it. So Jum'ah Salah, we know the eclipse prayer, we know it's prayed out loud with 2 bowings in each unit. Yani, when there's an eclipse, the Imam gets up, Allahu Akbar, then he recites a long surah. Then he does ruku', he gets up again, he recites, but a bit less than the first. And then back into ruku', and then he continues normal rak'ah. Then he gets up for the second rak'ah, he recites, now a bit shorter than what he did in the second. He goes into ruku', comes up, he continues reciting. Now this is the least amount that he recites. Then his ruku' and he finishes. So each rak'ah has how many ruku'? 2. Does that make sense? Yeah? So that could be a riddle. Which salah did I pray? I prayed 2 rak'ahs, but I did ruku' 4 times. Yeah? Could be a riddle, huh? Witr prayer. So witr, you can do 1. Person said, Sahih Muslim, al-witru rak'ah. It's 1 rak'ah at the end of the night. So the best is 3. And if you pray 3, you have 2 ways of doing it. 2 rak'at and then salam, and then 1. Or all 3 together, but you don't sit for the second one. Because the Prophet said, don't make it like Maghrib. Right, so you don't sit for the second one. Or you could do 5 or 7 or 9 if you want rak'at, and the Shaykh talks about how to do all of them at the end. The 2 sunnah of Fajr, 2 sunnah of Dhuhr, or 4. 2 or 4. Some narrations mention 2, some say 4, both are fine. 2 after Maghrib, 2 after Isha, Tarawih, before sitting in the masjid. There is khilaf, some ulama say it's recommended. Yani, Tahiyyat al-Masjid, when you enter the masjid, praying 2 rak'at. But it's best to always pray. Salatu al-Duha, this is after sunrise until for Dhuhr. For example, 2, 4, or 8. And you can, it is permissible to pray more than 8, but the sunnah is up to 8. Istikhara, anytime you make any decision, big or small, don't think it's just for big things, even small things, do istikhara. Istisqa, which is the rain prayer, and then the Eid prayer, which we'll talk about the Eid prayer once we get to fasting, inshallah. There are 3 times we're not allowed to pray. The first is from dawn until sunrise. After you prayed Fajr, until sunrise, you're not allowed to pray. So, Fajr 6:15, that's Salah, right? So you can pray, what can you pray? You can pray 2 rak'at of Fajr and Fajr itself, that's it. And if you miss the 2 rak'at, you can pray them later, but that's it. You're not allowed to pray anything else until sunrise. Shuruq is 7:19. So we can pray from 7:20 or 7:19, right? La. You have to wait how much? 10 to 15 minutes, right? 10 because that's the time when the sun worshippers worship the sun and so on. So we've been told to wait about 10 to 15 minutes. So if 7:19, I'll just say 15 minutes just to be safe, right? What time? 24 past? No, come on, pay attention. 34 past. Yeah? So 34 past you can pray. When the sun is directly upon the zenith. Zenith is when it's like right above your head. Yeah? And then from Asr till Maghrib. You're not allowed to pray. If, however, the salah has a reason behind it. For example, you enter the masjid, janazah, qada, like there's a reason, it's not just general nafil. Then it's permissible to pray. Okay? Now. La, it doesn't come under that. Right, okay, alhamdulillah. We finished with salah. Right, go on. Right, 5 minutes maximum. Yeah, go. There is a hadith of Prophet doing it, but many ulama say that's specific to the Prophet. Alright, but inshallah we'll talk about it in more detail once we get to the bigger books and discuss it, inshallah. If it's straight after the salah and you realize you must have been one action in 1 rak'ah, you just add 1 rak'ah, inshallah, and do sujood sahwi. But if it's after like a while, you've talked and stuff, and then best to do the salah. Yeah. When to do it, right. When to do sujood sahwi, very important question. Is it before salam or after? The ulama differ. For example, the Hanafi say after, Imam Shafi'i says before. But Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he was more strict. I'll get to him in a second, right? It's been narrated the Prophet did it before and after. Okay? Generally, to make it easy, we say, If you added something, you do it after. And if you subtracted something, you do it before. Okay? But the general advice we give to imams, obviously it depends on the masjid you're in, but in our masjid generally, we just stick to doing it before. Why? It gets too confusing for the people. Right? Sometimes before, sometimes after. The other issue is somebody's missed a rak'ah, you said salam, and then you've gone into ruku'. So you've gone into sujood, sorry. And they've already got up to make the rak'ah, they're going to be like, what do I do? Do I follow the imam, not follow the imam? It gets confusing. Right? So, don't worry about that. We'll, once we get to sujood sahwi, inshallah. Okay? I saw that smile slowly grow, and I knew exactly what you're going to ask, right? So that's what we say, just stick to just doing it before. Okay? Imam Ahmad rahimahullah was very precise. He said, the exact ahadith for the exact actions where the Prophet did it before, you do it before. And for those exact actions where he did it after, you do it after. That's a lot more difficult. You've got to memorize exactly what the mistake was, and right? So we stick to generally add something after you took something away before. This is what we say to the students of knowledge. Right? A general person, we say just do it before and that's it. Make it easy. And both are narrated, both are allowed. Just stick to what's before and don't make Salah too complicated. Now, you had a number of questions. So the hadith says, do not make, so I'll repeat the question. Why do some schools say when you pray 3 rak'at or witr, you sit for the second? This is because they interpret the hadith differently when it comes to do not pray like Maghrib. They say, we don't pray like Maghrib. Why? We do qunut. Qunut makes it different. And they generally also do the qunut before as well. So they say, that's the difference between this and Maghrib. Yeah? But there's many answers. One of the answers is that we say qunut aslan is not even obligatory. And if I didn't do a dua and I just prayed witr, so witr is accepted. Right? So how can it be a difference if it's not even obligatory? Yeah? And this is the answers. Inshallah, ikhtilafat level 2, inshallah. Okay? Yeah, but hopefully that answers the question. Yeah? So they have a different understanding of the hadith. According to us, we see as a weak opinion. Majority of the ulama see it. It's only the ulama of Kufa at that time that many took that opinion. But if I ended up in a masjid like that, I wouldn't cause an issue. Right? Because there's following an imam is accepted amongst the ummah. There's room for understanding of the hadith and so on. So generally we would say no, but like if it's an issue, don't make it an issue basically. Don't make it an issue basically. Yeah. Yeah. So this last question, yeah? Khalas. Feet, not legs. MashaAllah, legs. So generally, there is khilaf, do you do it or not? And generally, those that say you do it, they say sunnah. Right? But it's khilaf, right? Ibn Uthaymin says no, you don't want stuff, right? However, some of the Ahl Hadith, some of them have gone to extremes and said that it's obligatory. Huh? Some of the Ahl Hadith, yani. But inshallah, it's not from it doesn't affect your salah, inshallah. But if you can do it, it's good, because the sufuf should be like that. But one thing I will mention, even the other schools of thought that don't agree with putting the feet together, they do still say the shoulders should be together and your sufuf should still be in line. Like you're all in one line. But subhanAllah, you'll find you go to them masajid, one guy's here and there's like a meter gap between him and the next person. One guy's half a saf ahead, the other guy's half a saf behind. What sort of jama'ah is that? Right? So even according to their own madhab and so on, that's incorrect. Yeah, so that's keep that in mind, inshallah. Right, we'll stop here, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.